here on Substack. Um, how's everything down under?
It's all right. My older teenager came home today from 6 weeks in Canada, so I've got her back. Everything's good.
Very
How
good.
about- Oh, I think we're live now.
Yeah, I think it does this whole connecting thing, but I think it's actually recording. Uh,
Okay.
let me
How are
move
things up
before
there?
I, I'm gonna move before I knock over my camera behind me.
Yeah.
Um, everything is very fast paced and interesting, politically speaking.
Hmm.
Um, it seems like every day something new is coming from the Trump administration, and anyone can barely keep up with what's happening. But um, in general, personally, everything is going all right at home, and lots of big things coming up in the next couple months that we're keeping under wraps. We're not, um, but yeah, in general, everything is good.
Mm.
So for people who may not be familiar with you and the people who are joining us in the chat, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm Natalie, and I am based in Melbourne, Australia, but I don't have an Aussie accent because I'm Canadian. And sorry about that. And who am I? Well, I call myself a narcissism hacker. And it doesn't mean I go around butchering and murdering people who I think are narcissists. I basically acknowledge that everyone has narcissistic traits and they get us in trouble and are contributing factors to interpersonal dysfunction, interpersonal narcissism, and just overall conflict. And I help people become aware of the behaviors that the patterns of behaviors that they're seeing in others, but also turning the mirror on themselves and becoming aware of how they're contributing to some of the problems that they might be blaming other people for. So
Hmm.
I tend not to go into blaming and pointing fingers at people. I just like to highlight some of our behavioral patterns and some archetypes that we see in, I guess, the social sphere, especially on the internet. And they're not always positive um, representatives of, you know, moral and benevolent human behavior. So, oops, my camera is like, thank you. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay. Um, I do have a question for you
Let's
because
go.
narcissism is often thrown around um, when it could be something else, obviously. So,
Hmm.
for a layman's person, what's like a quick way to recognize, or actually, how about this? Just like a quick definition as to what narcissism actually is.
Well, so narcissism tends to be associated with self-centeredness, egocentricity, attention-seeking, entitlement. Um, some people might refer to it as highly insecure behavior. Others will refer to it as highly arrogant behavior that is actually trying to obscure insecurity. Because let's face it, people who have strong faith in and trust in themselves and in others don't feel the need to try to control others. So
Hmm.
that is, a very broad description of narcissism. Other people like to refer to narcissists, which is a personality disorder, for lack of a better word, where people behave majority of the time, if not all the time, in very specific ways, like I've just described. So everything's about them. They have a fragile ego, fragile worldview. They don't like to be challenged. They love attention. Some can be quite charismatic to draw in people so that they can get whatever they want from them. And there are different types of narcissists out there. Some are
Mhm.
the overt or the covert, some are the communal, so more of your like white savior types. Then there's the collective narcissism that we see in groups and tribes. Um, and yeah, so there's that. And then there's the narcissistic behaviors, which is what I like to focus on.
Okay. Is it possible? And I think I know the answer to this. Is it possible if there's, what's the best way of putting it? Let's say culturally speaking, right? You live in a town. Let's just say it's a very small, remote town. and the collective attitude is a narcissistic attitude. It's a narcissistic approach, right? But is it possible that people are just mimicking behavior of a few and it carries over culturally, but they themselves may not be someone who is narcissistic, who thinks that way? They're just mimicking behavior.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, let me check. So, if in an isolated community or a remote community somewhere, the feature of that community or that town is that everyone is out for themselves and they play power games and lots of power struggles, and doesn't mean that they are narcissists, but because that's the environment they're in and everyone is modeling this behavior, it's sort of contagious. So,
Yeah.
is that, yeah. So, it doesn't mean they're narcissists. Like, if we look at a workplace environment, and I talk about this a lot, you can have people like me who seem, great level headed, thoughtful, considerate, enter into a toxic environment where it is highly competitive. There's lots of power games, deception, manipulation, um, two-facedness, that sort of stuff. In order for me to survive and get ahead there, I'm going to have to behave like them because those are the preferred behaviors that help people get ahead. And if that's my
Mhm.
goal, then I have to start to assimilate to it and become it and play it. Of course, it's going to have some disadvantages on me if I have a conscience and I have strong moral principles. I'm not going to be able to do that very easily. I'll try, but it's going to actually hurt me, and I'll develop moral injury eventually. But
Mm.
doesn't mean, and everyone, there's narcissists. There could be some who are actually narcissists who are have large influence, strong influence, and they establish or sustain the culture because it suits them and nobody's holding them accountable. But the rest will go along with it because that's what happens. People fall into line into a system that they're in based on the conditions that are there and the norms. So if you have to backstab people to get ahead, and that's you know the behavior that everyone is doing and demonstrating, then you're going to do it too, or you'll leave. I will
Yeah,
leave.
and well, a good example, and I remember hearing as you were talking, I just remember the example, prison.
Mm,
Prison's a good example where, let's say, okay, you commit some sort of theft, right? And circumstantial or something like that, but you get thrown into a prison with people are highly antisocial. Their crimes are much more extreme than what you committed.
mm,
Um, but the overall culture of the environment is everyone is out for themselves, or you have to performatively do certain things in order to
mm,
survive there. Um, so I think that might be like an
mm.
example. Um, I think I will say that over time, I wonder if you have to adapt to it, and that's just something that you just say that this is who I am now. Like you just accept it. Whereas like maybe in the beginning it's kind of a mask. And we also wear a mask when I'm in front of family. I present myself in one particular way. If I meet a client, I present myself in a particular way. So we always have like little masks that we want to present to the world at times. So I wonder if that person becomes hardened by that conduct that really wasn't naturally them, and
Yeah,
it just carries over into everything that they do.
yeah, I would agree with that. So if you had to, I like to use the word assimilate because you are
Hmm.
beginning to, you go through a process where you have to subdue all the traits that will get you killed in prison,
Hmm.
and amplify the traits that will help you survive and maybe even get ahead and become more of the alpha, which can give you some protections while you're in there, depending on your personality and how you go about it. And when you're there, if it serves you, if you manage to go from faking it to making it, then it becomes a new strategy for survival and success that you might not want to let go of outside of the prison. It might be very hard to let go of that successful set of features or character traits in a different context. But in a different context outside of prison, those behaviors will get you labeled antisocial or, narcissistic or whatever because you're entering into a societal context. So it might not suit the person to let go of it, because if it worked in one, harsh environment, it might work in another environment, and they might test it out and then realize whether or not it's a successful strategy to employ in that other environment. Hopefully I answered
Yeah.
your question.
No, you did. You did. Um, Another question maybe some people might ask, are narcissists born or are they raised?
I don't believe any narcissist is born. I think there could be, genetic or epigenetic traits that predispose someone, but
Hmm.
depending on the environment, what we know a lot about the importance of parenting and being brought up in a nurturing environment where adults or authority figures or people around are attuned to the needs of the child, but not to the point where they're giving in to the child without any restraint or restriction or limits. So when you don't have those things in place, you're more likely to increase you're increasing the likelihood of someone turning into a problem person who is not well socialized and
Yeah.
reject authority or aren't intimidated by authority, and or behave in a whole bunch of maladaptive ways. And it's funny because my daughter is working on a project for her grade 11 psychology, and the first project of the year is to find a serial killer and look at their family of origin and compare, talk about nature versus nurture. So what do we know
Yeah.
about that person? Yeah. So, that's fresh in my mind. So there's the nature nurture, but nurture is a huge influence on whether or not someone develops a personality profile that is like a psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, borderline. And a lot of it has to do with abuse and neglect and childhood trauma. Not always, but yeah, you're shifting the balance towards raising someone who's going to be quite antisocial.
Yeah. I think the way I tend to interpret most uh, psychological personality traits is it's a development of a response to the world. So maybe for some child, they have certain needs, they're being ignored, they're being mistreated because they're expressing they want something, they're
Mhm.
lacking love, or maybe they're purposely being abused or something of that nature. But they develop this understanding that I don't like uncertainty, and the only thing I have control over is myself, and the only person who's going to look after me is myself. And so, damn everybody else, I'm gonna get what I need. Um, and so you kind of develop that belief system that the world is built to disappoint you because the most important people in your life have disappointed you.
Mm.
So I can understand that child who develops that disposition of the world, that it's meant to the world is for the taking, and
Mm.
the only person who's going to take it for you is yourself. Um, and then that's when you start to see human beings as transactional. Um, you know, I'm gonna this woman, I'm gonna have sex with her. She's gonna provide my kids, and as soon as she stops being useful to me, I'm gonna discard her and get somebody else. Like just um, so yeah, I think that's how I tend to see it. So
Yeah.
I, a lot of people see the outcome. They see the outcome like this person is bad because they did this, but what's the origin?
Yeah.
How did they end up becoming that person? And usually it has some sort of, like you mentioned before, insecurity, like the need to control something. In my head, and you're the doctor, but like in my head, it's the root of it is insecurity. The root of it is I fear that if I don't take control of this, it won't work out.
Mm.
Um, and I feel a sense of insecurity by allowing you to walk out of this house and go somewhere because I don't know if you're actually out there cheating on me. So I'm going to do everything possible to control the circumstance. But the problem is, the more I control you, the more I'm pushing you away, right? It causes the opposite effect. And the more that I push you away, the more I suspect that you're cheating on me. So,
Yeah,
so it's just like,
yeah,
it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's how I describe that when I talk about narcissism, because I look at the evolution of a person going upstream of how they're manifesting certain traits in the present. What led
mhm,
them to get like that? Because they're all survival strategies. And
right.
kids are learning from their environment, from how parents are demonstrating their responsiveness, their attunement to the child or misattunement, and
Mhm,
they're making forming relations in their mind between actions, outcomes, and then they're adopting these traits because that's what they're being shown. And so these are the things they need to do to survive. And it is rooted in insecurity, it's rooted in shame. And the two together are about, I can't have uncertainty because that means a whole bunch of other things, often fear of no longer existing, fear of
mhm,
insignificance, fear of being invisible, that no one knows me, sees me, cares about me. So I've got to be that person and screw the world, me against the world. I'm going to get what I can from this life and from everyone else because I've been so disappointed, let down by the authority figures who are supposed to protect me and love me, that I don't trust anyone and I don't even trust myself. Because if I was trusting, I wouldn't have that level of insecurity and deep shame and loathing about myself. So those are the
right.
roots. Yeah.
Do you ever watch? I know you're in Australia, but do you ever watch like talk shows?
I used to. We would
Used
get,
to?
yeah, like I used to, um, well, I used to watch the scandalous ones like Jerry Springer,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
all the Rivera,
I,
yeah, Geraldo.
oh yeah, oh man, you're bringing it back. I'm gonna say, I don't know if you remember Richard Bay. That's really bringing it back.
Yeah,
Um, I barely remember. I remember watching as a kid. It probably shouldn't have been, but I
yeah, we
remember
shouldn't have
Richard
been.
Bay. Um, no, but there's on YouTube. I watch episodes. My wife and I almost every day we watch episodes of either Maury or Steve Wilkos.
Mm,
Um, and the reason I bring that up is because often they're doing lie detector ones, and
mm,
it's about usually the lie detector ones are revolving around infidelity. Now, what's always fascinating to me, I want to say 9 out of 10 times, it's the husband who's accusing the wife. Now,
mm,
obviously, women cheat, right? So that's not a far out concept. But when you listen to the circumstance of everything, then you start to see like, all right, you think she's cheating on you. You listen to what he says. Seems kind of weak, and he's really trying. He's like, oh, I don't know what she's doing, blah, blah, blah. And then it's always like, one time she said this and it wasn't this. And I'm like, all right, so she lied once and you think that she's sleeping with hundreds of people? Like it just seems out of whack. Then the woman comes out and did give away every single time. She says, he tracks where I go. If I go to the store and it's 10 minutes away and I come back 20 minutes later, he's asking, what did I do for the 10 minutes? I've heard stories of the women who are at work and their husband or boyfriend wants to stay on the phone while they're working just so they can make sure that they're actually at work. Whenever I hear that, the outcome is always she's not cheating, he's cheating.
mm,
Every time. And it's so fascinating because it's like, wait a minute, you thought she was doing it, but you're the one doing it. The projection that happens every single time. And it usually revolves around his insecurity
mm,
because he thinks she's cheating. He's trying really hard to grab onto her and but he's just so insecure about the entire thing. And the only way that he feels better is by getting some sort of validation from someone else because he thinks she's cheating. They're probably not even having sex anymore. Who knows?
That's
And
my
so he
guess.
goes to somebody else. He's like, you know what? She's cheating. I might as well cheat too. And
Mm.
then half the time when it comes out that she's not cheating, he looks stupid. Like before you get to his results, he has his face like, oh, like he feels really dumb. And then, of course, they read his results, and he's been cheating multiple times, right? So it's one of those things. It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where you don't want to lose her, but then you push her away, and then you end up doing something that ultimately is going to lead to her leaving. That's like the cycle of insecurity that I often see.
Yeah. Well, sounds like these men want what they want and don't want to have any accountability, take any responsibility for their actions. And so, and it's interesting that they end up on these shows where they're going to be exposed. So it's almost like they want it. They want to be they want their wives to discover their infidelity. Um, so that it's almost like a child. So I feel like lots of men, lots of women marry one of their parents. And
Mm,
so it's a weird parent-child dynamic where he wants the mama to scold him for his bad behavior. That's his way of getting love or attention
mm,
or a form of affection through discipline. So if he hasn't been getting it because he's like pushing her buttons and trying to be, sounds like a little bit of coercive control, having wife under surveillance when he's out messing around. Um, that he's looking to be discovered and doing it in uh, such a voyeuristic, exhibitionist sort of way. So one way for to get some narcissistic supply that you're on, a TV stage, broadcast to the country globally, and getting that
right.
attention. Yeah. So it's this weird, unconscious, subconscious game of sabotage. But I think it's part of it is to get the attention from the mama figure because that's maybe the way he went about it when he was little.
It's I'll tell you this, it's very fascinating to watch. Um, you know, the guy who's actually the bad guy accused the other person of being the bad guy kind of thing.
I wonder where we've seen that in, the world stage of politics and geopolitics. That never happens.
This never happened. Are we the baddies?
Yeah.
Uh, but no, but obviously we were talking about the family dynamic of basically creating the narcissists in our societies. I do have a question for you. I don't know. I'm just gonna kind of say it because I don't know exactly how I'm trying to say it.
Yeah. Let it
But
out.
are narcissists bad?
Oh, that's a good question. Instantly, my mind goes to, you know, public figures who are widely known as narcissists, who shall remain nameless.
Mhm,
Again, it depends on the context and what they're doing. Narcissists, uh, an example of a narcissist archetype, believe in their benevolence, that they have justifications for their actions. They believe their intentions are good. And because they're surrounded by sycophants, no one's telling them that they're bad, or if they are, they get rid of them. They don't listen to them. So they keep doing what they're doing. They can contribute some benefit to a group of people or an individual while at the same time doing some damage to another group of people or that same group of people.
mm,
Um, but they might not care about the harm. They might not care to hear about it because it goes against their very fixed and fragile worldview, black and white thinking. So they will minimize it or justify or deny it in their mind. So they will never have a really um, realistic view of reality where there's lots of things that happen that coexist. They will only focus on the things that they see they're doing well or their justifications for their actions. Doesn't mean that they're doing, yeah, there could be some narcissists who do lots of great things and then kind of privately do some really bad things, but they're public. um, actions are seemingly benevolent and positively impactful.
Hmm.
Again, it depends on the person and the enabling environment around them.
So would it be fair to say that all sociopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are sociopaths?
I don't know. That's a tough one because we're now looking at like the DSM, the description, the clinical description, and that's not my area of expertise because I'm not a psychologist. I'm a different doctor trained person. But yeah,
Hmm.
there's overlap of these traits. If you look at the
Okay.
dark triad traits, there's overlapping traits with all of them. That's why they tend to be, drawn out in Venn diagrams and things like that. So there's lots of overlapping. So there'll be sociopathic traits in some narcissists, narcissistic traits in sociopaths for sure.
Okay. Because the area that, speaking from a cultural and political arena, the area that because I don't, it's not that someone says the thing that I agree with
Mm,
and automatically they're great. I'm like watching their conduct, and there are a few people who show, I don't want to make this about them per
mm,
se. There are a few people who just destroy people who are on their side politically, or even
mm,
friends. They might have one minor disagreement that's not a big deal, and that person destroys them publicly and proceeds to make their life far more difficult moving forward off of one minor disagreement that
mm,
could easily be just overlooked or discussed privately, right? And I've seen that pattern, especially from one particular person, repeatedly.
mm,
And what ends up happening is they become prominent and everybody rationalizes their behavior because while they might destroy that one person who's on their side, they're going after the enemy with the same venom. And they
mm,
like that, right? So they like the destroyer with when it's in that direction. And people can't see that this person's a destroyer.
mm.
When something doesn't suit them anymore, they destroy. And so for me, I'm watching the behavior and all the clues are there. It's just a matter of the opportunity where they're ready to burn that bridge because that bridge is no longer useful to them.
Mm.
And I've seen that person burn bridges personally, between like different individuals who are in the same space, friendship wise, publicly and privately, destroy.
Mm.
And then, even though this person is prominent, for whatever reason, maybe there's some behind the scenes disagreement, whatever might have happened behind the scenes, they purposefully wanted to destroy their relationship, their business relationship.
Mm.
And now this person is on an island of their own making. Um, and right now, I mean, they are doing fine theoretically, right? Because I think at the end of the day, these are like the lone wolf type of people where they just don't play well with anybody. Um, and so I think this is ultimately what they wanted. They took everything that they could. So they got promoted, propped up
Mhm.
by these organizations. They did all this stuff, made a lot of money, all these connections. And when it no longer was useful for them, they burned it all down.
Yeah.
And now everyone's like, oh my God, this person's crazy. Oh, when did they go crazy? And I'm watching, they've been crazy the entire time.
Yeah.
It's just that their craziness was targeted at the people you don't like, you know. But so
Yeah.
it's the context. So I bring that up to say it's not just one person. I've seen a few people who have a a very sociopathic tendency where not only do they destroy the enemy, they maim the enemy, they don't care. They say stuff like "Don't apologize." Like they do not care. You can clearly tell they don't lose sleep over it, and they feel absolutely justified doing it, and they move on with their lives. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if that person's kicking and screaming and shouting. saying that you hurt me. They do not care. You deserved it.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that is a much bigger problem coming from prominent people because, just like I mentioned before, the jail, right?
Mm.
It becomes this environment. And if all the top people are narcissistic and sociopathic, and this is the only way to survive in this arena, then you start seeing people who take on the words like "don't apologize," which you should apologize if you did
Yeah.
something wrong, right? You start seeing cultural sociopathic behavior
Mm.
all around you. Um, so yeah, I said a lot, but what do you think?
Yeah. So the scenario you describe is basically what happens when someone allows vengeance, the emotion of vengeance or vengefulness, to drive them and justify eliminating their threats. So yes, like what you said, they've extracted everything that they're opportunists. They find
Yeah.
somebody, oh, we'll get in a deal. You'll get this from me. I'll get this from you. But meanwhile, they have their own calculating agenda and
Hmm.
extract all the resources they can. And either the person does something, so the person they're extracting from said the wrong thing or didn't, bow at their feet, um, and or didn't. They just, I'm tired of you. I got what I need. I don't need you. I had this all along. What are you talking about? This was my stuff. So I call those the knowledge vampires. So it's not just
Mm.
knowledge. It's not just information. It's a body of work. It's IP. It's a whole bunch of things. It's networks. It's connections. It's resources. They just absorb it because the other person feels they don't see what they're getting. They trust this person, and so they repeat this pattern. So in order to not be called out, they use their new power, their newfound power and protections to silence and eliminate and destroy that person. So it's sociopathic, but I would also suggest it's sadistic because must derive some sort of pleasure from doing something like that, knowing that they've won. I'm the
Yeah.
ultimate alpha. No one, and they do it in such a public way to send a message to everyone: don't mess with me because this is going to happen to you because I'm the righteous one here. How dare anyone defy me? So complete narcissism there too. So you're dealing
Yeah.
with a number of these traits, and they become very dangerous because they amass great wealth, great protection. They infiltrate into higher levels of power, government,
Hmm.
I don't know, and then they get to use those people as their tools to fulfill their fantasies of greatness because power is addictive. Once you have a taste of it, you're seduced and you want more. And especially if you have strategies that are very effective at allowing you to build your power, your reputation, your status, you will keep going because the strategy's working and nobody is taking you down for it. No one's holding you accountable for it. So why would you stop? And
Yeah.
like you said, it's been modeling behaviors or messages in society because people want to be as powerful as them. And what that speaks to, and this is a word that I'm using a lot lately, is the lack or the erosion of morality in our society. There's been, we can blame postmodernist thought, we could blame a whole bunch of things, but it's not clear what right and wrong is to a lot of people anymore. That you
Mm.
don't destroy people's livelihoods, you don't gossip about them publicly, you don't humiliate people, you don't do things like that you wouldn't want to be done to you if you didn't have the power that you have. So, but that's lost on many people because all they're thinking about is what they want and what they believe they deserve and their entitlement to, and that everyone will know their greatness. So nobody will ever screw with them again.
Mm.
Yeah.
Kenneth Harrell, if he's still on here, he wanted to know what is narcissist supply?
So well, you probably know the answer to that, Adam. Do you want to give it a go?
Actually, I'm not, I've never heard that phrase, so
Oh,
that's why I'm not
okay.
sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you under the bus. Okay, so narcissist supply is the key person that is attached to the narcissist person they're drawing all their energy from. So their emotional
Mhm.
energy, their resources, their connections, their network, their knowledge. So you think about a friend. And yeah, I'll draw from my own personal experience. I'm not the narcissist in this scenario, although they might think I am. So that tends to be the case. Narcissists like to accuse everyone else of being narcissists, but not them. So this person, we became friends, and I became the supplier of transportation. I became the supplier of entertainment or attention or affection when they're feeling down, but it wasn't reciprocated. And after being around that person, I would feel very drained because it's like they've been taking from my life force energy. And I was giving because I felt an affinity to this person. I've trusted them. I felt, they're good value. So there has to be some exchange. It doesn't just you form an emotional bond with someone, and then over time, over quick time, they start to draw energy. So the person who is providing the things for the narcissist is known as the narcissist supplier, and so the
Mm,
supply is energy that they're extracting from you, or that you're willingly giving them, and you can't enforce any boundaries because you would have established a precedent, and every time you tried to pull back a little, they have a reaction, and they might go into what's known as narcissistic rage, which seems like an exaggerated reaction to something that might just be a disagreement, or you just raising something to their aware that you want them to become aware of something that's not quite working for you and you want to talk about it. They go straight into rage. How dare you? Look at all the things I've done for you. You're the problem. All that stuff. So that's the narcissist supply, the attention
that's
that they're getting from others. Yeah.
that's interesting. Now let me ask you this: is there a, we'll just say typical, because obviously everyone's different, right? But
Right.
is there a pattern as far as what narcissism looks like between men and women that are different?
Yeah, I get this question. I get this asked a lot. And again, there's obviously variations. And I think where the variations are is the extent that someone is expressing feminine traits versus masculine traits.
Hmm.
So, so the types, there's a narcissism spectrum or behavior spectrum where you have like the malignant, grandiose way. If you think about, say, someone like Trump, who's been, named a grandiose, malignant narcissist. He's very overt. He says all sorts of things that are outlandish. He kind of pushes his way, forces his way, bullies his way. So, these are features that stand out. Then there's the other side, which are not obvious at all. They're covert. The person might seem a little depressed or, fake humility. Where they're like, no, no, you're the smart one here. You do this thing. I don't need to do it. So they're a little more sinister. So you'll have men and women on both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. But when I think about women who express narcissistic traits, they tend to be doing more of the masculine behavior where they're
Mm,
forceful, competitive. I mean, women are competitive too, but they do it through, you know, there's gossip, there's smearing, there's, forging certain connections with others that are, make them more powerful or offer up other better opportunities. So women tend to use these more covert, sinister, calculating, and actually ruthless behaviors more than what I've seen in men. Men tend to stand out as like the psychopathic behavior, which is why it's hard to admit or notice when we see women who are psychopaths or serial killers. It's like, no, but that goes against all the features that we understand are women or mothers. That can't be. You have this
mm,
cognitive dissonance because they're supposed to be these nurturing. How could they do these horrible things? So they are more subtle. They're more sinister. They might be covered by this nurturing vibe, but it's like a evil nurturing vibe compared to how you might see men expressing a lot of these traits. But we talk about narcissistic behaviors, it's like gaslighting. It's one way of thinking, black and white thinking, superiority, darvo, so denying accusations and reversing victim and offender, just needing to be right all the time. There's just these traits that you'll see across both men and women.
Hmm.
It's just how they're expressed in the context of relationships, because it's never just about an individual. These are relational features. You will have, I might act, like you said, we wear different masks or we express different aspects of ourselves at different volumes, depending on the context. If I didn't trust you, but I didn't want you to know I didn't trust you, Adam, I would be acting like this, but I wouldn't be honest and saying, you know what, I don't actually trust you to, like I would just try to subdue the things that I feel, so that you don't notice it. Whereas in other environments, I might be more assertive and honest because I don't give a shit. Um,
Right.
so these will get expressed in different relational context, depending on what that person needs to gain from being in that relationship.
Interesting. Um, Speaking, if I can go back to the talk shows, I love watching talk shows because um, it's like people watching, right? You watch them enough. Like I learned a lot from about psychology and just like human behavior by watching loads of Dr. Phil
Mm,
because he would have the same type of shows over the years, but just with different guests. And they'd be from all over the country, sometimes from Canada. And you're watching the circumstance, and it's like the people are doing the same exact thing. So, like, there's something here, and you just watch the behavior every single time. So that's how I really started to kind of pick up. Like
mm,
when this happens, people tend to do this, and this pattern that keeps happening over and over. So to the talk show point that I wanted to make, because you mentioned how we have this instinctual belief that every mother is this nurturing, caring person, and the child is born and they just will die, jump in front of a bus for their child. But that may be mostly true, but there are definitely way more mothers who are the opposite of that. Um, and what I often see in these talk shows, um, just I crudely say, ain't shit mothers,
mm.
right? But usually, because we recognize that the most important parent to a child is the same sex parent, usually it's the daughters who come on, and the daughters are they're crying to be seen.
Mm,
Like they're just dying for someone to acknowledge. Like they may be on there because they're saying, I was molested as a child. Like I've seen episodes like that. I
yeah,
was molested as a child by my mother's stepfather. And then she left me with my grandmother and left town and abandoned me.
yeah.
Like she's screaming for her mother to be there and she's angry. I
Get the dog, someone's at the door and he's losing it.
was
Sorry.
about to say, you have a narcissistic dog who
I
doesn't care
do.
that
It's
we're
all
having a
about him.
conversation.
He's like, give me attention. My childhood wounding has made me this way, so it's not my fault. It's everyone else's fault. You all have to cater to me.
That's right.
Yeah, so they'll eventually
Um,
he'll eventually stop. Okay.
yeah.
Sorry.
It's
I can see.
okay. um,
Oh, our pets. But they
eventually.
are narcissistic. They're like, feed me, love me, give me, give me, give me. It's
That's
like
right.
children, which you could call them narcissistic. They're not. They're just living a program of having hopefully trustworthy people meet their needs so that they can grow and flourish. Yeah. And
Exactly.
some people never grow out of that. They stay stunted in that state. And
Yeah.
talk a whole lot about, cluster B society, because those are the features of that immaturity, emotional immaturity.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, it's all good. It's all good. But what's always interesting, especially in a talk show format, one person comes out and they're speaking, then the
Mm,
next person comes out and they've been listening, right? So they come out and let's see what that person's reaction is. And I can't tell you how many episodes I've seen where the daughter is screaming in pain because she was molested, something happened to her. I'm just going to talk through the dog.
just talk through the
Just
dog.
talk to it. Then the mother comes out and they are yelling and screaming at them. and they're saying that's a lie. That didn't happen this way. You were doing this, and I'm just like, you said the dog has a point. um, they basically the pattern that I've noticed. Um, if the mother comes out and she talks to her child like they're just another person, like uh, almost like a scenario where someone bumps into you on the street and you have a verbal argument. There's
Yeah.
no emotion attached to it. You're just trying to win some argument and you curse at them and insult them. They talk to their daughters the same exact way. And that part for me tells me a whole lot that there was no love there. Like there's
No.
no nurture. And what's unfortunate is that, and maybe it's just something that's built inside of us. We always want that connection with our parents, even if they've disappointed us 100 times. We still like we're just hoping out for like that one time where they realize, like, I just want a hug. I just want you to say I'm sorry. Um, and sometimes you'll see the parent hug the child or say I'm sorry, but it's like I'm sorry. it's not.
Not sincere.
It's not
I'm
sincere
feeling pressured to
whatsoever.
say it in front of a studio audience and TV. I
Right.
have to say it now. You put me in this position and embarrassed me.
Exactly. Crying with no tears, just like everything about it is performative.
Yeah.
There's no authenticity. If they even do that, many times they could do a lie detector test, and I've seen those of the daughter, and the daughter's telling the truth. She was molested by your boyfriend. And your reaction is, well, you weren't saying all that back then. It's like, wait, hold on a second. Your daughter was molested by your boyfriend. Zero empathy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. It's, yeah, it's more common than we like to admit that
Yeah.
women are horrible to their children and they prefer the attention of a partner, even if that partner is molesting their own children. And you have to wonder, what did that person, that daughter, go through to bring herself to a public stage and go and tell her story? Like, what, this was her, cry for help. I see this, that. And I'm sure there's some that are manipulative and whatever, but if
Mhm.
the lie detector test said, it happened. So she needs attention. She's hoping this will be the forum that will finally maybe get her mother to hear her and see her. But no, the mother's affronted by it because how dare you shame me and reveal our secrets to the world? Your job is to protect us and keep our secrets, to keep our shame buried. That's your job. You owe us. We brought you into this world. You owe us. It's that kind of mentality, that this
Yeah.
self absorbed, narcissistic, you are there to serve me. And doing this right now is betraying me, despite the parent being the original betrayer of this child multiple times by not protecting her from her boyfriend, not holding him to account, not going to the police, not doing anything legal. So the daughter has continued to experience this abuse, probably hoping one day mom will see the light. She probably raised it lots of times, got
Mhm.
shut down, denied, which made her not want to do it again, to the point where she has to come on a show I guess, as an adult to try to like deal with this conflict, with this horrible situation. So yeah, there's lots of mothers out there who are so self-absorbed, so narcissistic. It's all about them, and anything that gets in the way of their fantasy, including if it's their child, they're demonized, and they're the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of, just like in the talk show sense. I've seen a lot of cases like that. Um, I've seen some of that in person. Um, uh, you'll read what we're not going to say what, but you'll read very soon what I'm about to say. Well, let me just make sure I did this up. Okay. Um, in my hometown, I remember walking down the street. This is years ago, long time ago. I was walking down the street, just walking home, and there was it's like a two-story uh, family house. That's what it looked like, if I remember correctly. I don't know. It looked two stories. Anyways, it's not that important. Door opens. It's a woman comes out, and she has a boy that she's holding his hand. I want to say the boy can't be more than 3. Like he can walk, but not like great, not that. So he hasn't been walking that long. So maybe he's like 2.5, 3. And she's like yanking him to hurry up. And I'm watching as what's going on because they have these stairs. So they're, it's like 2-level stairs that they have to come down, from the entrance. And she's yelling, hurry up. And then she said, you always do this.
Mm.
And, the kid is like almost ragdolling as she's yanking him. And he's trying to hurry up walking down those steps. And you can tell, he hasn't been walking that long. And, they get in the car and they drive away. And I just thought to myself, that sounds like she's yelling at the child's father.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Projecting onto the male child, the father or the ex, the person who's probably not in her life,
Yeah.
maybe not even in his life, and projecting her anger at this child to be able to have the capabilities of an adult man who treats her better. So this poor child is locked into this role of the asshole ex or the asshole father when it's just this innocent child, and he's going to be you'll manifest a lot of the negative things that she's been kind of dumping at him, unless there's other balancing factors in his life that can help potentially mitigate that. But yeah, destroying that relationship very early on. And so, I read a number of papers and some Substacks talking about the statistics of family violence inflicted by mothers on children. So usually,
Mhm.
it goes down a hierarchy. If there's a man in the house, the man will, be violent towards the mother, sometimes as well as the children. But when there's no man around, there's no father figure, partner around, the mother will unleash on the children. And yeah, and there's way more cases than people talk about. Because
Yeah.
again, we don't like to see mothers in this way. We already have it hard enough. We have misogyny, we have patriarchy, we have all these things, systemic oppression working against us. We don't need to have bad narratives about us. We don't need things to keep us down. But these are important things because we're raising a society of very damaged, wounded people.
Now, if I'm to be racial just for a moment, because I think
I
there
will
is
allow it.
you allow it, um, because there's a cultural
The power
aspect.
play I just did right there. The white passing person who does yeah. But go on.
She took over the live stream. This is my stream.
Interrupted me.
Um, no, because there's a cultural aspect to some of this.
Mm.
So it kind of goes back to if everyone around you is doing something, do you question if it's a good thing to do because everyone around you is doing it, right?
Mm.
If you go up in an environment and everyone steals, then maybe stealing isn't that bad. I don't know. Maybe, that seems to be the moral code of the
Mm.
people who are around you.
Yeah.
So if you grow up in an environment where love is harsh, um, or what you think is love comes with side comments, yelling,
Mm.
you're insulted, you're cursed at, and when you mess up, you're beaten. And then you go out and you talk to your friends as a kid, and you're like, "Yeah, they do that with me too." And then your friend's like, "We all having that done." It's like that's what it is. And what I've seen too often, and I told someone one time, it was like, "You sound like you have Stockholm syndrome," because you'll hear them say, Man, I was a bad kid. If I didn't get my ass beat, man, they saved me from blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you sound like you have Stockholm syndrome. If only that adult who is 3 times my size didn't take that broom, that belt, or punch me and bruise me and beat me down, I would have been a bad person in life. Huh. Hmm.
Yeah.
Like it's that kind of I must rationalize the bad behavior of my parent.
Mm,
And what I see and what I've seen too often is a Black cultural acceptance that being beaten, being insulted, being yelled at, being cursed at by your parent, that's what being a Black kid is like.
mm,
You just grow up and that's what it is. And then you start looking at the statistics and the environments. My wife grew up in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. She said in her neighborhood, there was only one family that had both the parents in the home, and they were from the Caribbean.
mm.
So you have that cultural norm of the women are leading the homes. You have the cultural norm where everyone gets their ass beat. People aren't very wealthy, they're lower middle class or poor. And all of their frustrations just get unloaded on the children who are keeping them in poverty, right? It's all their fault.
Mm.
And the men who didn't stay around, well, guess what? My son looks just like him.
Yeah.
And it's just like this cultural norm
Okay.
that surrounds me. And then when you come out and say, hey guys, maybe we shouldn't have been treated like that when we were kids, they really bounce on you.
Mm.
You're not allowed to say that you shouldn't hit kids or
Yeah.
that hitting someone isn't love. I've made the argument if a man said, I hit my girlfriend because I love her, you'd be like, that's crazy. But if you say, I hit my kid because I love them, you're like, that's a good parent. He really cares. Like, what? Like, that's what I'm dealing with. I wrote something for Dad Save America, and much of the comments are that, and I knew it was coming. That's probably the most controversial thing to talk about is saying you
Yeah.
should not hit your kids. You should discipline your kids, but you should not hit your kids. It is counterproductive. And if you turned out fine, well, guess what? People get hit by cars and they turn out fine. Does that mean you should get hit by a car? Like, there are better ways to approach raising your child. How about why don't we look at a better way of approaching raising our kids and disciplining them?
Yeah. And
Um,
how do we define fine?
right.
You know?
But then you get into these linguistic battles between no, no,
Mm.
I spank my child. I don't hit them. What do you think a spank is? Like,
Right.
what's the definition of a hit? Why does a spank work in the first place? Because it hurts. You're inflicting pain. If it didn't hurt, then you wouldn't do it. You'd hug them instead. Do you hug them? No. Why? Because that hug feels good.
Yeah.
Like, why are we playing? We're playing these games
Yeah.
of redefining abuse. That's what
Yeah.
I see more often than not.
Yeah. Discipline must equal pain. Discipline cannot equal, pleasure and
Yeah.
uh, and calm and peace. No. So that's the things that need to be divorced in people's minds, the feeling that causes that, impulsive reaction to whack their kid because that's their program. That's how they experience their discipline as children. Um, so this is something I'm in the process of writing about and what you've raised. And we had talked about it a bit um, with women and why we kind of protect women. So this is about how those who are abused protect their abusers despite the damage that was done to them. There's still something, again, we can call it cognitive dissonance or some like wire cross in their mind or their psyche that because they're the authority figures who brought them into this world and did whatever they did to raise them, that still somehow they owe them something or that there's something about playing that part that justifies what was done to them. So so there's something that happens in I guess, the psyche of the developing child, that they internalize the responsibility for their behavior so that they protect the parent from the accountability of their actions. So I'm the
Mhm.
bad person. I'm the one who needs to work on my things. If I didn't get hit, I'd be a bad kid and I would be, in jail or whatever. They find all these justifications, everything, all these mental gymnastics so that they can continue to protect this, I guess, idealized version of a parent that never existed, to preserve something. And whether it's because they hope one day to see that ideal, and they don't want to like tarnish it in any way, or this is just, I don't know. I don't have, you know, good reasons for it. It's just, this is what we do. We protect our abusers because there's still something about them being the authorities, that somehow needs to be preserved or honored and respected, even though that might not be the language we use. We might say, I hate my parent. I hate, I despise what they did, but there's still something, this love that I wanted to give to my parent. It needs to have an outlet. They need to have it because I have nowhere else to put it if they don't get it. So I'd rather protect them in this weird fantasy, and
Mhm.
continue to take responsibility for the things that they did to me.
Hmm. Um, I actually want to respond to Kenneth Harold. He was
Yeah.
referring to scripture, spare the rod, spoil the child. So, um, and this is a good faith chat. So I'm saying all this in good faith. Um, and I've had this specific conversation with um, a theologian friend of mine, actually a couple of theologians that I know. Um, what we have to understand about Proverbs is inspired by God, but Proverbs isn't directive from God. It is not a commandment. This is old Jewish wisdom, right? That's the purpose of Proverbs. It is good wisdom. Now, the interpretation of spare the rod, spoil the child is that the rod, people want to interpret the rod as being a physical rod that you use to inflict harm against the child.
Yeah.
Now, the other part is Proverbs is from the Old Testament. We are Christians of the New Testament. The Christians of the New Testament have Jesus Christ as the conduct of character. Now ask yourself, do you think that Jesus Christ would look you in the face and say, hey, hit your child to show love towards them? Of course not. Now, it's not to say that Jesus Christ was this hippy dippy person, but we know throughout the Bible, God destroys cities when people start harming children, right? He's destroyed civilizations for harming children. So, at what point do we take the context of that one line, which, by the way, my one friend is theologian, has gotten into all these theological arguments. She'll tell you, she's like, I've seen men validate that it's okay that they rape their children because children are to respect their parents. They use that line coming. This is not a direct line from the
Mm.
Bible, but the referencing to the Bible, as if in the context of the Bible and in the teachings of Jesus Christ would be fine with you raping your children, right? So there is a cultural, um, yes, Jesus came with a new covenant, exactly. So, but there's a cultural referencing, um, especially most Black Americans are Christians, of finding that thing to validate what they've been doing.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the need as a child, let's say you have parents, you have both your parents in your home, and you feel that your parents loved you and raised you right. And so if I tell someone, but you shouldn't have been hit as a kid, that's not love. How dare you tell me that my parents didn't love me? They did love me. Sure, they told me to go out in the backyard and grab a switch so they could beat me with it, which on its face is very sadistic. If I kidnap someone and I say, go and pick the weapon that I get to hit you with, that's a very sadistic action, right?
Yeah.
We have to ask ourselves, why are Black Americans telling their kids to grab a weapon to be harmed with? So we have to start asking, where's that historical lineage coming from? That's a whole
Yeah.
other topic. So we have to look at all of these things. I'm saying most Christians are not Christians. That's a whole other thing. Um, but
Others
what
are coming.
we have to be very critical of these things,
Mm.
because just because our parents loved us does not mean that everything that they did was optimal. That's all I'm saying. If your parents hit you, it doesn't mean that they hit you because they hate you. They hit you because their parents hit them and their parents hit them, and so on and so on. It's this is what we've always done. And
Yeah.
there are so many things in our society is this is what was always done. And so when I make that challenge, hey, is there a better way to approach this? That's all I'm saying. Is there a better way to approach this? And
Mhm.
when someone says no, but they never tried, or when someone says no because I was raised this particular way, and then, well, guess what? Then nothing changes in our society. But
Yeah.
I personally have a problem with, as a Christian, when I am commanded to look at the conduct of Jesus Christ and read the scriptures from the New Testament, and someone keeps pointing back to one line in Proverbs, in that line in Proverbs is referring to discipline. Everything around that Proverbs line is referring to disciplining children.
Mm.
You do not want your children, don't do things to your children that will make them hate you,
Yeah.
right? This is all part of the same line. They're referring to discipline. It doesn't say, well, if you hit them this hard, but don't go past that point. It doesn't say anything like that. It's that one line that everyone keeps running to. And when there's one line that everyone keeps running to in the entirety of a Bible or two Bibles, then that's where we have an issue.
Yeah.
Um, have you seen what happens to men who never see? This is all right. So Kenneth, this is the fundamental problem that I'm having. Not hitting does not mean not disciplining. Those are
Yeah.
two different things whatsoever. I had in my article, if you want to read on Dad Save America, I wrote about I was raised and I was hit. So when I had my son, when he was young, I started popping him, but I didn't like it. Why didn't I like it? Because I remember when I was a kid, I didn't like it either. And I didn't like it because when you're hitting me, I didn't exactly discipline means to teach. I didn't like getting hit because I already felt bad. You already yelled at me. You told me I did something wrong. Now you're going to hit me on top of it? Like, so what am I actually learning? I'm learning to be afraid of you. I'm not, and maybe that might change my behavior, but is that the right way to go about it? So I stopped hitting my son and I just talked to him. If I had to yell at him because whatever, but we talked about it. If he did something wrong, he was punished. But I didn't put my hands on him and I didn't tell him, I'm no longer going to hit you. And from that moment on, I never hit my son. And we just talked. I discussed with him, you know why I'm disappointed? You know, you messed up on this. You're not going to get this. We're taking this away. I did everything else but put my hands on my son.
Yeah.
And that is discipline. And as Kelly's saying, discipline comes from discipleship. Discipleship means to teach. What are you teaching when you tell them to grab a switch, when you tell them to grab the belt, you say, here's a broom, and you're going to feel this? What are you teaching them? And we have to think about the entire lesson of that. Are you just getting your frustration out? Or are you teaching them something? Are you
Yeah.
teaching them to fear you? Like these are the things that when it comes to raising kids, we have to examine.
Yeah.
And it's not, and we have to get rid of like these old narratives, like hitting you hurts me more than it hurts you. Like, shut up. It's not. It's just like this is abuser talk. Like whatever. Yeah, we're just rationalizing stuff at that point.
Yeah. This is great because, I love that you brought up that line, the spare the rod, spoil the child, comes from Jewish scripture. And what a lot of people don't realize when they're cherry picking a statement to justify their conduct and even think that this is, God given rule or allowance, is that scripture is meant to be interpreted at four different levels, depending on your level of wisdom, consciousness, knowledge, scholarship, that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
rarely is the literal interpretation the accurate one. There are, rod is symbolic, it's not a physical thing. And if you went more into the mystical aspects of Judaism, you would start to explore the tree of life and the balances of opposites, of extremes and deficiencies, of trying to find this middle path. And the middle path needs to be guided by moral principles that are set out by all religions. It's just the way people interpret them is problematic. So if you and all religions, in my opinion, were brought forth by some master in order to support humans to praise God, love God, express that love for God in a number of different ways through their actions and their thoughts. But so we have to ask ourselves, would you whack Jesus with a stick as a child if you knew Jesus was divine? Would you do that? No. Would you do that with Moses? Would you do that with any sort of so-called divine being? No. So why would you do that to your own child? Like, why isn't that logic taking place? Because these are supposed to be tenets for love, underpinned by divine principles or moral principles. And the other aspect is, again, back to mystical Judaism, there's a number of different divine attributes called sphirot.
Mhm.
And one of the balance is between loving kindness and discipline, or loving kindness and self restraint. So, in modeling to child that they're doing something out of line, or they've crossed a line in some way, by you hitting them, you are not exercising self restraint. You're letting your uncontrolled feelings and your, annoyance with them not doing what you want, your need to control their behavior according to the way that you're comfortable seeing them or experiencing them by being unrestrained. So that person is not showing the loving kindness, which is one side. Where, if we're showing excessive loving kindness and no discipline, you're going to end up with children who will take over the family and rule the family and be complete bullies, narcissists, you name it. So we do need that balance, but it's how we model it. And discipline is that self-restraint or that restriction or limitation. We can't just be endlessly loving, but we can't be endlessly extreme with our discipline, because both are going to be damaging.
Right. I think there's a balance. There's a
Yeah.
balance that you have to have when it comes to it. But I think that we're losing the teaching aspect towards discipline.
Mm.
Like, imagine imagine taking a test. You're, let's say you're in grade school, you take a test, and your teacher writes on your paper, fail, you get an F, but they don't mark which ones you got wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I failed, but I don't even know which ones I got wrong, like what I did wrong. And then after class, you say, hey, can we talk about this? Because what did I do wrong in this?
Mm.
And they say, I've been up here teaching you every single day, and you did it all wrong. Get out of my class. It's like, so not only you told me you did it wrong, you won't tell me what I did wrong. And now when I go to address you, you won't even highlight this. Like, I'm just supposed to know. Meanwhile, we now today, maybe hundreds of years ago, we didn't fully grasp this, but we know more about the human brain. We know that the human brain isn't fully developed till the age of 25, right? And we know that children seem to be impulsive, right?
Mm.
So we have children with underdeveloped brains that need repetition because they're going to forget stuff. They can't see around the corner, right? And you're like, what's wrong with this kid? Why couldn't they see that happening? Because they literally don't have the brains to see it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to train them. You have to train them constantly with teaching them to remember this. When you get off the bus, you have to do this. If someone comes up to you and says this, You have to tell them this constantly. You cannot be annoyed that you're repeating the same thing over and over to them because their brains are still underdeveloped. And if you hit them for literally a physical thing that they have no control over, like their brain is not fully developed, you're causing more harm than good. And that's what I'm saying. There has to be a better way. We have to find a way to teach. We can't just run to the belt. And I've seen this. I've seen we run to screaming and shouting into the belt. And then saying, well, I was frustrated. I loved them. I just didn't want them to get in trouble. Or Kenneth said, the world can be cruel. Okay, the world can be cruel, but it doesn't mean that you have to be.
Yeah.
As a kid, you want to have that. You want to have that. We kind of leftists ruined this. You want to have that safe space, right?
Yeah.
But where the world can be cruel, but you can come to your parent who loves you and can be honest with you. I don't sugarcoat anything with my son.
Mm.
I tell he says he wants to do something, I will support you, but just so you know, the failure rate of doing that's pretty high,
Mhm.
right? So he knows
Yeah.
I will never lie to him, and I will always be honest with him, and he can always come to me and get an honest opinion about what is going on, and he knows that I have his best interest in heart. And not every child is going to interpret that ass beating as love.
Yeah.
Right? And just because you got your ass beat and you knew that your dad loved you doesn't mean that your child is going to interpret that the same way. They might get pissed that you decided to hit them.
Mm.
And then you're going to have more problems because they're going to become defiant
Yeah.
and they're not listening to you because they don't fully understand why dad keeps hitting me or why mom keeps hitting me.
Yeah.
When all I'm trying to do is get their attention, I want to be closer to them, and then I mess up, and they have no problem giving me attention when I mess up. So guess what? That's what I'm going to keep doing, so they give me attention, right?
Yeah.
So it's this. I just want to keep coming back to
Yeah.
as a parent. And now my son is 19, but as a parent who grew up as a child without his father, I started from ground zero of not knowing what a father looked like and having to figure this out. And I was constantly reflective in saying there has to be a better way than what my father did, which is absolutely nothing. He wasn't there. So how do I become the ideal father? And so my goal was to be the father that I always wanted. That was my goal. And the father
Mm.
I always wanted, I wanted to be able to come to him when I need him and to hear me out when I had some sort of issue. And I didn't want to be hit by him. Just like I didn't want to be hit by my mom, but she would hit me, right? So it's not to say that my mother hated me or didn't like me or anything like that. But that's what when she grew up, that's she was hit too.
Yeah.
You know, so this is what I'm talking about. There's a cultural aspect to a lot of behavior that happens, and then we have the lines of justification that comes through it. And because we're children who want to please our parents and want
Mm.
to find like the most ultimate best best case scenario for what our parents are doing, we come up with all of these excuses for them. But I think that no matter it, I'm not a perfect parent. I want my son to be a better parent than I was.
Mm.
I'm sure there's something that I didn't do enough of with my kid. Um, but all I know is that I have the best of intentions, and there are certain things that I'm looking at when it comes to my kid and how I was raised, and I didn't want to do that with my son.
A reflective parent is a learning parent and a self-improving parent. Yeah, going back to some of the things you said, I see the problem is twofold. One, parents have not learned to understand what the child is trying to communicate, what need they need, they're wanting that parent to meet. So they see distress in some way, but not understanding, is it distress? Is it, like they don't understand the nuance because they haven't learned to read their child.
Mhm.
But that's also how they were modeled as when they were children. And the other part is parents, I don't think, want to hit their child. I don't think any parent feels good hitting their child in the process of hitting their child, but it's an impulse that they can't stop in the moment, and they don't necessarily they don't know any other way to do it. So there needs to be conversations about alternatives. And one of the things you talked about is you have a talk with your son. And I guess it depends on the age that you can actually talk to reason with a child. But once they start speaking and responding, you can start using your language that way. Um,
Mhm.
and being more descriptive, just like you said, like, you gave the example of a test where you get an F and the teacher's like, you did it all wrong. I've taught you everything and you did all wrong, but doesn't tell you what you did wrong. Same thing as a bully boss who gives that shitty feedback, that general feedback, but doesn't tell you what specifically you haven't done. So you don't know where you stand and what you need to change. So being descriptive about this is, I noticed that you did this and this is what happened. Okay, now the child gets some information about their own conduct that they didn't have before. Hopefully, they understand, and the parent is trying to teach them about what to do differently in the same way that we're talking about needing to help parents to have options of what to do differently when their child behaves a certain way, and that they're not perceiving it as the child is trying to manipulate me, the child is trying to get on my nerves, the child is hates me, the child is just tricking me. Lots of parents have these narratives or interpretations of their child's behavior. And I think another aspect, and I'm going to ask you the question, do you think part of it is this kind of entrenched belief within the collective psyche of, you shall respect my authority. I don't have to explain myself. So this sort of, authoritarian parenting style that, existed many generations before and still exists, but less so now, less obviously so now, that, putting Cartman's voice on, respect my authority, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to describe what you did wrong. You should just know. That kind of crazy thinking. Do you think that's part of it?
Yes. So much so that, and this is why I say, like, if you take one circumstance and you just swapped out the noun with something else, does that sound right? So I'll give you an example. I've seen, we'll just, because it's a racial cultural thing
Mm,
as well. I've seen, let's say, a bratty little white kid who's in some shopping mall, and he's not like terrible, terrible, but he's just pouting and stuff, and he's not like running around knocking stuff off the shelves or anything crazy like that. But he's just showing an attitude, right? Kids show attitude. And I will hear, and I have heard Black parents talk about, almost like the way they talk about it is like, if that was my kid, I would beat the shit out of them. Like,
mm,
almost like, tag me in, I'll take care of it. They need a good ass. You know why they're like that? Because they need to get that ass beat. They like, it's almost bloodlust, right?
yeah.
It's a very authoritarian, and in much in the same way, if that person came into my country and did that, man, I would lock them up forever. I'd put them on the guillotine, and I'd show everybody else, you don't mess with me. It's that kind of authoritarian-ish, bloodlust type of approach, or type of description, I should say,
It
because
makes
obviously
me
they're not killing children.
yeah, it makes me think of a master-slave dynamic. Oh, so you will do as I say, and you step out of line, you will get beaten, you will get, everything, so that you never wanna try that again, but they're doing it to a child who doesn't have the reasoning capabilities yet to make sense of what's going on. They just feel pain and know that they don't like it, but they don't know yet what they need to do differently to avoid it.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
once a parent starts using that strategy and they're not reflective in the way that you describe, they're going to default to that strategy every time until it becomes more violent, more extreme, or less effective, and the child grows and starts to fight back.
Yeah. And that's the other part. Um, well, all right. So Kenneth is partially correct. Part of part of the problem in modern parenting is that there are parents who want to be their child's friend, which is, in my opinion, equally as destructive, or maybe even worse. Because then there is no, because you need to be an authority figure, but it doesn't mean the authority figure needs to be an authoritarian. Those are two
Yeah.
separate things. So, yes, you do not want to be your child's friend, and you should not be your child's best friend. Maybe when they become adults, right? You can have more of a friendly relationship with them.
Mm.
But as they're children and you're trying to raise them, you're trying to teach them about the world and teach them that authority figures exist and you're the most important authority figure in their life, there needs to be boundaries. Like I joke around with my son, but there have been times when I look at him and said, no, like you went too far. I'm not one of your friends. And he's like, oh, okay. I, I realized where that line was. I tiptoed past it. I'm going to go back. So he understands there's a line. I will joke with you, but I am not your friend. Just
Mm.
like I don't hang out with my boss. There's a line there. He's an authority figure.
Yeah.
I feel like I shouldn't, even if I wanted to, I should not hang out with my boss. I don't want to be friends with my boss.
Mm.
There's a line of an authority figure, and crossing that line makes things worse. So it's not a good idea to be friends with your boss. You could, some people are, and it works out fine. Who knows? But let me tell you, it's
Lots of
hard
don't.
to. Yeah, listen. People are going to argue and say whatever, but
Yeah.
I will say it is very hard to tell someone no, you can't do that. Or if you do this again, this is going to happen. If they see you as their friend, because at the end of the day, they don't see you as an authority figure. Just like you and I were friends. If I told you what to do, you were like, "F you. Who are you?" Right?
I wouldn't say it quite like that, but
Right. In your head, you'd be
a
like,
version of that.
"Adam's telling
Yeah.
me to do this."
Yeah.
No, I don't
Well,
have to do that.
can you tell me what you mean there? I'm not sure I'm following. Well, it's like fuck
Right,
you in my head. Yeah.
right. But like when you're a friend, you're on equal plane.
Mm.
And so if you're your child's friend, who's steering this boat?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So someone has to be the captain of the ship. Who's going to do
Yeah.
it?
The child
So,
doesn't have the knowledge, the wisdom, the expertise to guide themselves. They're fully dependent on you. As they get older, they
right.
try to like to think that that they're not as dependent on you until they get stuck and they're like, "Mom, I need you." So yeah. But you're making a distinction between authoritarian, which is like a dictator style parenting, and authoritative, which is a balance. You have a backbone, but you're expressing that love and you're finding, again, constantly finding that middle ground between, helping a child learn to regulate and, you know, become socially responsible person or responsible person as they gain independence while
Right.
nurturing them. Yeah. Yeah. And you're clear about your role. And it's hard to maintain the role, the authoritative stance if you're the boss when you become friendly and form friendship with your report. It's an odd thing to experience. And yeah, like you said, some people do it, but how do you go back into authoritative without making them your favorite? And I
Yeah.
think that the report who thinks those relationships are good is because they're probably likely the favorite, and others around them might not think it's great because they're not getting the same opportunities as the favorite is.
That's a very good point. We've seen I've seen circumstances like that where it's
Yeah,
like, oh,
it's
they're going to
fun for
hang
me.
out. Oh, they got this. Oh, they got that. It's like, what do we get? Oh, yeah. No, these are very, very good points in parenting roles. Um, defining defining where you stand and why you stand there. That's why I think much of the issue with most relationships and being a parent is having a relationship with a child. Um, the breakdown to most relationships is lack of communication. Like those examples that I gave you of watching these talk shows,
Mm,
much of the issue is that the child who's now an adult is in pain. The adult, let's say if they do care, right? But they're not listening to what is being communicated. They're
mm,
seeing the shouting and the anger, but what's the root of that? The root of it is that they're hurting And before, when they didn't shout, you didn't see them, you didn't advocate for them, you didn't say I'm sorry. So now they're pissed and they're shouting and yelling, and that's how they talk. They immediately run to just shouting and
Mm.
yelling. That's how they communicate. That's the breakdown of the relationship.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have any sort of successful relationship, whether it's with my wife or whether it's with my son, we have to talk. We have to talk and we have to be honest. We can't, you know how people get, and sometimes my wife is like, no, it's fine, it's fine. It's like, all right, you can get away with it right now, but I'm coming back to you in an hour, and you're gonna and
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about this. What's going on? Because I know you're full of shit. I told my wife that all the time. You're a terrible liar, which is a good thing. So like, what exactly is the problem? And then
Mm.
finally, when she's comfortable, she's like, well, it's this. And I was like, one, I already knew that. I just wanted you to tell me. So let's talk about it. And then we resolve it and then we move on and it's no
Mm.
longer an issue. The problem is if we're not talking to each other and including talking to your child. And I
Mm.
think sometimes the authoritarian nah, I can't talk authoritative or I should not the authoritative, the authoritarian side of things thinks that having a discussion with a child is beneath them.
Mm.
And no, your child is you,
Mm.
right? And just like a very simple practice, you used to be a child. Would you have appreciated if someone told you why you fucked up and what you could do not to fuck up again
Mm.
without screaming at you? You know, that would
Yeah.
be kind of helpful. Now you don't have to get on your knees and say, "Well, little Timmy, blah, 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 blah." You don't have to like do that, but you say, "Listen, you messed up. Here's what you did. You could do this. You could do this better. I believe in you and I love you. But next time, if you do this, you're gonna get in trouble.
Mm.
You know, whatever your approach might be. But you have to communicate with them.
Yeah.
But if your solution is to immediately scream and yell at them, throw them in their room, call them names and insult them because you're angry that they did something wrong, when doing something wrong is the essence of being a child because you're literally inexperienced and your brain
Yeah.
is developing. So I think we have to communicate. I think communication is incredibly important. Otherwise, we're going to raise narcissists.
Yeah. We're gonna look at our cluster B society. They are the products of the gentle parenting cult.
Mm,
And I'm calling it a cult because that's not parenting. That's friending, and I don't want them to feel upset. And their feelings are more important than anything. Yes, feelings are important, especially during childhood. And yes, you're helping them develop literacy, an emotional literacy. But it's not all about feelings. You have to help them make sense of their experience, give them language, but not tell them what to think, which is what a lot of
right.
parents like to do. It's help them develop language to describe their experience. And yeah, there's recommend
I just
parenting.
read what Ian
My
said. My
child is
child
my
is my.
hero. Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh my
My
God.
child is everything. All my hopes and dreams channeled into a human, no pressure at all. I want them to be the thing that I could never do myself. And they are just an extension of me, not their own individual thing. So you've got that problem as well, where parents don't know how to cut the umbilical cord or parent,
Yes.
and they just kind of take ownership over their child's success, and they post it all over Facebook as if it was their own success. It's like, that happened because of me. It's all about me. And
Yeah.
the child is just their accessory. And I feel for those children. That's why I not put anything about my own children. Not that I'm not proud of them, but it's no one's damn business. They're not my
Yeah.
accessory. They're not here for my glory. They're here for themselves. I'm here for me. And I'm doing my best in whatever way to raise them into responsible, loving, and flourishing adults.
Yeah.
And a lot of parents don't think that way. They just see their child as an extension, and that's part of the narcissism. They're just this aspect of self, the idealized aspect of self, and then there's the scapegoated child who's like all the demonized and hated aspects of self that they reject, and so they just project that onto that child. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a it's a I think the key to life, or the key to approaching just about everything in life, is to find some sort of balance. Um, you have to find a way, like we'll just go to disciplining a child.
Mm.
My goal was to find a way to balance being stern and loving with my son, um, with telling him what to do, but listening to where he's having trouble, right? Not one or the other, not tell me how you're feeling. It's like, no, like, let's talk.
Mm.
This is two-way. Why are you doing this? Well, no, just tell me the truth. It's okay. We can have this discussion. Um, like developing an honest, and I think we underplay honesty, to be honest with you, when it comes to like relationships.
Yeah.
I, you know, um, my wife, something happened recently, and she wanted me to tell like the vet, like, oh, just tell her that you did it, but I didn't do it. So when the vet's like, oh, did you do this thing? And I'm like, no, we forgot. I'm not going to lie about that. Like
Yeah.
my rule is that I'm not going to lie, even like these little white lies. I'm not going to lie. And so when my son comes to me and asks for my honest opinion, and he may not like the answer, but I'm not going to lie to him. That is real love. And so when I look from a theological standpoint, when they say I'm the way, the truth, and the light, truth, like being honest and truthful with love is incredibly important. And if you lie to people, that's not loving, right? That's
Mm.
deceptive. That is the opposite of being someone of Christ. So we have to be honest, right? And you can tailor your honesty so it's not sharp,
Mm.
um, but you have to find a way to be honest, where that message is received, and then you can have that discussion. So I do think that we should find some sort of way, and not just with raising kids, in our personal relationships with our coworkers, our bosses, our spouses. We have to find a way to develop a balanced approach when having these conversations with someone that we care about, or at least when you go to work every day, would you rather be in an environment where no one gets along or that you get along? Obviously, you want to get along. So you have to have a relationship. So you can't isolate yourself. You have to talk to people.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds ideal, Adam, but I think about different workplaces that I've been in. Honesty will get you backlash. And so sure, you're like, okay, I can go work somewhere else, but you can't just get jobs all the time.
Yeah.
So there
Well,
is
how about
something
this?
about tempering your honesty dependent on the relationship, because not everyone's going to approach relationships the way you are with your wholesomeness. Other people are deceptive and self-deceptive. They don't know. They think they're being honest, but you can tell there's an incongruence between what they say and what they do. So you're like, you're a liar. Even if you don't think you are, I can't trust you. So if I'm honest about this thing, or I've seen what happens when someone is truly honest with you, you can't handle it
Mhm.
because of your narcissistic traits. So I don't need to be that level of honest with you, because I could see that it's going to have negative repercussions. I will only go a certain distance. So it's not really a lie. It's just I'm not telling you the full truth because it's not wise for me in this relational context to do so. So it's tempering it to the relational context, and it does require discernment and having seen, noticed patterns, because people are predictable. I say this all the time and people are like, "How dare you?" Yes, people are predictable when they lean on their narcissistic traits. When it's all about control, domination, insecurity, you can predict. And I haven't been wrong with any of the clients I work with. At least that's what they've told me, that you can predict what's going to happen if you challenge their worldview by being honest and saying the thing that you're afraid to say. Um, you will get exactly what you predict because you've seen it. There's a pattern, and they can't
Yeah.
behave any other way. It's only those who are reflective, who are considered in their responses and their actions, are willing to change. That they're less predictable because they're prepared to change after examining themselves. But everyone else is not. There's some very it's like an algorithm. You can tell exactly what's gonna happen next and prepare your response for that reaction, so that you're always a few steps ahead. And
Yeah.
just something done dealing with vengeful people who have tried to smear me, attack me. I calculated all the things because they think that you think like them, but
Mhm.
you have to think like them, but you have to act like yourself, which is not like what they're going to do. And that's how they can't get you a
Yeah.
lot of the time, unless they're very powerful and have lots of legal power and social power. Then they unleash all their flying monkeys on you, and then you're probably a little more screwed, as we talked about earlier.
Well, how about this? I would slightly modify what I was saying. Um, in some circumstances, you can't tell the truth, but still don't lie.
Hmm,
That I think that's a better way. Like obviously, you don't want to tell your boss everything that you're thinking.
hmm,
You don't want to be 100% forthright when it comes to certain things, but don't lie. When something is presented to you, you just don't lie about it,
hmm,
right? You can use, and this is where like communicating is not just me and you talking, it's learning how to talk to someone,
okay,
how to tell someone something difficult in a soft way, all these things. So we have to learn how to speak to someone, just like you wouldn't speak to a 5-year-old the same way you speak to a 35-year-old, right? So you
yeah,
have to modify how you speak. Um, right, tact, exactly.
yeah,
Um,
that's the word.
so you have to find this way, but I will still lean on um, for my own conscience. I don't lie.
Mm,
And when I have lied, even if it's something small, I feel terrible.
mm,
And so that's my God-given conscience saying, you did wrong. You should apologize. Don't lie. So that's even more of like a compass in my life. I just don't lie. I just don't lie to people.
mm,
Um, and I feel so much better by not lying to people. And if I'm around someone that I can't be 100% honest with, I'm just not going to lie to them.
mm.
So I'm going to hold my tongue about certain things when it's necessary. But
Yeah,
I
holding
think
your
I think
tongue is
that's normal.
yeah, that's it, and that requires some wisdom of like, I don't actually need to say this here right now
Yeah.
or in this way. So someone asks me, what do you think? Or did you have any? I don't know. They want me to come to some decision. I've already come to a decision, but I'm not going to tell them yet because I don't feel it's safe or the right time. I'll say, yeah, I've done some thinking, and yeah, I'm not sure where I stand on that yet. I'll get back to you. So it's
Yeah.
sort of a lie because I do know where I stand, but that could change. So it's kind of not a
Mm,
lie, but I'm not going to tell them because it's not my best interest in that situation in that moment. So yeah, it's tactfulness, but it's also it requires wisdom. And you get wisdom because you've been in situations, similar situations in the past that have burned you. And you're like, I
mhm,
don't want that to happen again. I need to examine what I did and what I believed about that person. What did I expect was going to be the outcome? And I need to modify my thinking and therefore my responses so I don't experience that again. But I can't develop the wisdom without reflecting on the consequences of my actions and my thinking that led to those actions
yeah.
and the feelings that influence that action.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you for. I feel like I could talk to you a long time, but I don't want to
I
keep you
know we
forever.
can. Adam said first, let's FaceTime. I know we can go on and on. And lots of people have tuned in. We've just had more and
Yes.
more people joining us. So clearly they're
You know
liking
what?
it.
Joe
Thank
Rogan
you.
style. We're going for 4 hours. Let's kick.
That is too
uh,
long. Who's going to want to
that's too
listen
long.
to us talk for 4 hours? We will love to listen to ourselves talk for 4 hours, but
Well, I did want to bring up something, and because we were talking about communication, and
mm,
I think it's something that is lost on a lot of people. The art of getting people to work with you. Persuasion, right? Not manipulation, persuasion. Um, so what I mean by that, I'll give you a perfect example. I used to do tech support for this. I'm not going to say the company name, but I used to do tech support for this large company. We work in this call center, and this is when you work in a call center, especially like tech support call center, you get a variety of personalities, right? Um, but you would sit next to each other, and occasionally you would tune out and just kind of listen to whoever's talking, and then occasionally you tune in to the people who are sitting next to you and how they're talking to people. And what I noticed was there's basically two types of people. There are the people who modified their language depending on who they were speaking with to to accomplish a goal, or the people who never modified their language and spoke exactly how they understand things to someone who has no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So for me, if I'm talking to an older lady and I can clearly tell because I'm listening to her, she's in her 70s and she has a remote and she needs to program that remote. And I'm listening to how she talks and she's speaking very basic. I say, okay, do you see that red button? Right? It's next to the button that has these letters. Yes, I see it. You're speaking her language. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had a call with something very basic like programming a remote, which to most people takes a couple of minutes. But I've had an older lady who has no idea what's going on technology wise will stay on the phone with me for nearly an hour only because I got her on my side and she believes that we're going to accomplish this goal together. And it's because I was patient with her, I spoke her language, and I never made her feel like this is something is that she could never accomplish. And I would sit next to somebody who is frustrated with the call that they have, but I'm listening to how they're talking.
Yeah.
There's one guy who would literally say, he was like, oh, I'm having internet issues. I can't get online. Okay, can you go to the ONT? The ONT is outside. You'll see this light. The light is out. And he's just rattling off stuff. And he's using the technical jargon. They have no idea what that means. Even if you say the acronym is this and the acronym stands for this, it's like, why are you telling these people that you're destined to get nothing out of it? And so I use these as an example because what I found is that by trying, yeah, lack of sensitivity, exactly.
Ian's on fire.
Um, but what I found is that this was a skill that I learned of getting people, especially when you work with the general public, you get a variety of personalities on top of having coworkers with variety of personalities. And you learned almost instantly what type of person you're going to deal with. And the type of person you're going to deal with, you have to modify how you speak with them and to get them on their side. Sometimes people come in pissed, and all you have to say is nothing. Just let them, don't even confront them.
Yeah.
And then you wait a little bit, you say, I hear what you're saying. We're going to work together. We're going to get this figured out. And 30 minutes later, thank you so much. I've had calls where they're crying, and then we got it all working. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, it's diplomacy. You have to figure out a way to get people on your side to work with you.
Yeah.
And so, if we're going to our relationships, are you likely to get more cooperation with someone if you're using all of their trigger words against them? If you're yelling at them, are they going to work with you? No. If you're saying you always do this, are they going to work with you? No. Like, so what is the thing that I can do so that we can work together? What is the thing that you require so we're on the same side? And if we have that approach to just about every relationship that we have, you know how much easier your life could be when it comes to dealing with people if you have that general approach. And the last thing I'll say is that's what I was teaching when my son became a teenager. I was teaching him how to read people. And so sometimes we watch these show together, or he might be, he was talking to some girl and didn't work out. And then I would have an honest conversation with him. It's like, if you meet a girl who is like this, where it comes from this, you have to ask these particular questions to yourself. You have to examine this. You have to look at this. And he's like, oh, okay, all right, that makes sense, right? So we're having a discussion about the type of people you're around, the different personality types you're around, and then you have to figure out, how do I get these personality types to work with me? And when you do that, your life is so much easier. And then you just sit back. You can predict what you need to do. Oh, this person's a hothead. Let me just they're just going to do this. And you just wait. And then you can come in and you can talk to them and you can get along with them. Right. So I think the art of getting people to work with you and get on your side is incredibly important. And I think it is severely lacking in political discourse.
Okay, so I want to comment on
Yes.
that beautiful, again, this is what we can do to make the world a better place through
Yes.
communicating and being willing. You have to be interested and curious and be, emotionally awake enough that oh, they're frustrated, they just need to unload for a few minutes. I will let that happen, and then I will contain it and get alongside and start to build rapport and trust.
Right.
So, and watching movies and shows and things like that with my daughters so that they can learn how to read people, it's been great as well. They're both narcissism hackers now, thankfully. While still acknowledging when they can go into their own narcissistic behavior, so that's another good thing as well. That's worked out. But I want to say yes to what you said, but. So yes to
Yeah.
everything you said, but again, we're thinking about the relational context. They're coming to you because they need something and
Mhm.
they've been frustrated, and you are the nice person on the other end, and you're working really hard. All these skills that you talk, all the skills that are required to get alongside somebody is a lot of work. You're working
Yeah.
hard to build that rapport and trust and to get them to be receptive. You're code switching to make sure that you're on the same page, and they're understanding you, you're understanding them. Now, if we're going on, if we're looking at, friendship, workplace context, or even political discourse out in the interwebs, we're not looking, we're maybe looking for connection. We're maybe looking to, form a relationship, but it's different because it's not one person coming to you because they need something from you that you're going to deliver on. So we're expecting both parties to have the same approach that you described that will most likely translate into this, civil discourse. But that's not the case because people are so hot-headed about political topics that their emotions get the better of them and they get reactive. And
Yeah.
so you have to be the one, the mature one, going, okay, yeah, okay. I have to be the one here to have to see things from their perspective, because when they're in that triggered state, they can't see mine at all. They need their perspective is the most important one. And every time I try to come in and massage and find a way to introduce a different perspective, they're not receptive to it because they're so outraged and activated. So I have to be the mature one in this interaction with the stranger I don't know, to have to get alongside, build some trust and rapport in this weird way online in order to have a chance that they're going to, be receptive to me. And I have to manage my ego along the way because I want to be heard here too. Why am I giving this person so much airtime? Why are they more important than I am here? So not all interactions are worth that. Not all interactions are going to be civil because the other person's not approaching things in the way you describe. But they might think they're being reasonable, but they have, no real grip on reality when they're in this dissociated state of you know outrage or whatever emotion has possessed them in that moment. So
Yeah.
in other relationships, hopefully when you're forming friendships, there's this kind of negotiated approach that you're like, yeah, I want to get to know you better. There's things that I really connect with you on, and so we need to be explicit about what we want from each other, which is a weird thing because friendships just kind of form, and then over time you find if they're healthy or not healthy, and then you have to work on it, and then some friendships are not worth it because again, one party is prepared to do the work to come to the middle and the other one isn't, because they expect you to comfort them and placate them, because that's the precedent, unfortunately, that's been established. And you didn't notice it until you got to that conflict point. I'm done.
Yeah, yeah. There's obviously, especially when you talk about friendships, there's a balance. So like,
Mm,
I'm not, if I'm talking to my friend, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to placate to them or
mm,
anything like that. If there's something that I want them to understand, we're not having like a debate, but I'm talking to them about something. I say, I have a really good idea, and this is maybe how you should approach it, right? It's just one of those. And I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine earlier talking about this very thing. I said, here's how I would approach it. And I have to explain an idea to him in a way where he understands. One, there's already good faith because we're friends. So
yeah.
that part is fine. But I have to explain it and explain it to him in a way where he understands and he is receptive of it. And so what type of language I use, what kind of words I use is incredibly important. So when I was saying like political discourse, like especially you and I, we write stuff. From a writer's perspective, the words I use will cause a particular reaction. And
Yeah.
so if I could have all the points in the world, but if I use the wrong word, um, then people are going to react one way or another. And so it becomes to the point where I use very particular words at very particular times.
Mm,
And there are times that I'm graphic because I either want to make a joke or I
mm.
want to cause you to have this illustration to see how ridiculous it is. And my other article the other day, I was funny enough, we were talking about narcissists. I was saying some of these people are so narcissistic that I'm willing to bet they masturbate in the mirror. And
Right.
my mother texted me, I read your article. Why did you say that? I was like, oh,
Yeah. Mom, you're not supposed to read that one.
right. But it's that, but I use that as for a very particular reason and just like catches people.
Yeah.
And I want them to have that illustration. It's a goofy illustration. And most people don't masturbate in the mirror. So like, uh,
Well, you don't know.
well, you know what? I'm not in
Have you
everyone's
taken a
home.
survey? Do you really know? I don't
What's your study? What's your survey questions? What course did you take to learn about the masturbation habits of narcissists?
know. That could be a doctorate
That's
program.
it. That would be a doctorate program.
Yeah, of like
What's your
and I quote
thesis?
persuasion of
Narcissist
like
masturbation.
useless research topics that someone dedicated their life to become an expert in. Yeah, good one.
Yes.
Oh, Ian's full of good stuff today. He's on fire. Ian should come on. Yeah, you were talking about how you support a friend. Yeah, like if you have a really solid, mutually trusting and respectful relationship, you'll always be able to raise sign. But I've learned over the years, not but, and I've learned over the years that even in friendships, we can start to take some things for granted. And
Mhm.
for me, I'm like the, academic, whatever background compared to a lot of my friends. And I can go into expert mode, and that doesn't leave room for hearing about what they were thinking, that about how they would approach something. So I've learned to ask. So how would you go about approaching this problem? Can you talk me through your thinking? And then I'd be listening out for the things that overlap with what I know and the areas that are gaps. And then is it okay if I share some of my thinking about this? So they've had the opportunity to share the ideas, and then I'm adding. So we're complementing each other with our knowledge and expertise so that both have, contribute meaningfully to help a person solve a problem. I mean, that's my general approach to life, is coaching, facilitating friendships, and even with my girls. Not always with my husband, though. I have to work on that. But I have to work somewhere. Yeah, so that both end up feeling valued as a result of that, um, interaction that way. Yeah.
And that, I meant to bring that up. I learned that, I probably learned that too late in life, where I was like, I should ask if it's okay if I give my opinion to them, if it's like unsolicited, right?
Mm.
And I was like, that's perfect. Because if they say no, then no. But if they say yes, you can't get mad that I gave you my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. You're not gonna like this. Here I go. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're at
Yeah.
least they gave the acknowledgement, and you can't get mad at me, if I'm telling you what I think. And I think that has been like a game changer of a strategy of putting that person in the driver's seat, to my opinion, right? And and sometimes I'm like, listen, it's up to you. Like, are you okay if I tell you my opinion? Oh yeah, yeah, tell me. Yeah. Like they love when you ask them that question, is it okay with you? You can say no, but is it okay?
Yeah.
And that yields far better results than someone says something, you're like, you know what? I don't think you should do that.
Hmm.
They're like, I didn't ask you what I should do.
Yeah.
Right? So they become defensive because of that. But if you ask them, is it all right if I tell you my 2 cents? And
Or
I've had someone say no,
yeah.
no, no, I just wanted to vent. Okay, no problem. You don't want
Yeah.
any opinions, you just want to vent. So that's a game changer. If people did that, man,
Well, it's a
it,
sign of
you
it shows respect that
yeah,
you don't know everything, and you're not assuming they don't know anything. You want to hear my thoughts on this. That's the language. You want to hear my thoughts on this. I have a theory about this. Can I share it with you?
yeah,
I have a theory about what might be going on here. Is it okay if I, share? And most of the time, if not all the time, they're like, yes, I want to hear it because they're wrestling with something. They're wrestling with an unknown or an uncertainty. And of course, they're going to want a different perspective that might fill the gap, that might give them the insight that they're looking for after I've heard and understood. And they know I've understood it because I fed back my understanding. And they're like, yep, you got it. Yeah. So again, it's a collaborative effort to come to a conclusion or a solution about something. And yeah, it's then you feel more bonded, more secure with each other. Yeah, in a close, trusting relationship, you might not always ask, but it's worth it because it's just again, I still need to demonstrate respect. I don't want to assume we have it and they feel it. I need to keep demonstrating it. That's how I sustain and deepen this relationship. But like I said,
yeah.
we can take these things for granted. Yeah. And just
And
assume we're good. Yeah.
yeah, the last thing I'll add to what we were talking about, there are so many people who have relationships with friends and family, and they are never honest with them. I found that to be a very common thing. Everyone's afraid to say the thing, to acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Mhm.
But then when you say, listen, can I tell you something? Is it all right if I give you my 2 cents? And you're honest with them, they're like, wow. No, no, you're the first person that ever told me that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, because everyone's lying to you.
Yeah.
And there's so many circumstances where I've dealt with people where, and this is where the communication part and being honest with people is important. Like, you can be honest with people, you have to find a way to approach it. But some people just automatically go to the, I'm not even going to bring it up, we're going to pretend that your hair is not on fire and there's no elephant in the room,
Yeah.
everything is okay. And meanwhile, the person that they do care about is hurting themselves, getting into terrible
Yeah.
relationships, making poor decisions, is spending all their money away. Like, there's somebody that I know who I'm like, they're an addict, right? And they're like, no, no. I was like, look at all the things that they're doing. Like, I think you just look at the list. They're an addict. Why aren't you telling them they're an addict? And it's because it's a relative.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, I can't. And I'm like, I can't tell them they're an addict because I'm not their relative like that. Like, I don't have that relationship. It needs to come from you.
Yeah.
You have to tell them, but they won't do it. And you just see them slowly messing things up because no one is willing to be honest with them.
Yeah.
So
There's so much in there. We could go in and on another tangent about family
yeah,
systems and again protecting the system. I would rather protect. It's the same reason why, what's happened in Jewish communities or, Christian communities where you had religious leaders, sexually assaulting children or family members sexually assaulting their children, and everyone is quiet about it because they'd rather protect the system than bring shame and disrepute to it, even though the person who is responsible for causing harm is going to keep doing it and never held accountable. So we'd
mhm,
rather protect the reputation than admit our shame and expose that. Because again, back to shame, shame is not the problem, it's the response to shame that can be problematic. Shame is
yeah,
important because it is our part of our moral compass. It's an indicator of how we're doing.
yeah,
Morally, are we aligning with our principles or not? And am I prepared to tank this relationship in order to, live into my values, or do I have to keep belonging or fitting in according to someone else's expectations and rules? So that's why people would rather not name it up, and it requires courage. But there is this level of needing this to show loyalty to the system, and
mhm,
I by me exposing this truth or naming the elephant, I'm betraying the system instead of protecting it.
yeah. I think that's a good point to end that. We were going for about 2 hours now. Um,
A little while. My
but
phone's about to die, so yes.
but everybody who's been in the chat, um, this has been a good back and forth. Um, we had some statements that were made and some challenges, all done in good faith. And I appreciate if someone has something to add, and we have some sort of disagreements. Doesn't mean I think you're a bad person. We have some disagreements. We can agree to disagree. That's what this type of stuff is about. Obviously, I disagree with everything that Natalie said,
Yeah,
and and
evident.
and somehow we're still friends.
Yeah.
So
Although I might shit talk you behind your back to about 10 people and recruit my flying monkeys to come out and mob you and cancel you publicly.
as long as they're flying monkeys, I'm cool with it. So,
Yeah.
um, but no, this has been a great conversation. I want to try to have this maybe weekly. Um, oh, thank you, Ian. Yes, I am. I am. I am
Cardinal
all
emphasis.
that.
Yeah.
um,
The $10 words come out with him.
yes. So yeah, I want to try to maybe do more of this, whether it be with myself or other people here on Substack. Um, I'll do it on Zoom so we got you guys can actually join in.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
I just haven't said, hey, who wants to join the conversation? But maybe we'll do that in the future. If it's a solo one, who wants to join in on the conversation? We'll have a topic, that kind of thing. I'm still ironing it out, but I want to have a more uh, all right, Kelly. I want to have more of a interactive experience with my audience, and we can have these discussions all in good faith, and we can disagree or agree to disagree or agree, whatever, and still support each other. So once again, thank you, Natalie,
Thanks,
for
Adam. It's
spending
been fun.
your yes, for spending your time. What time is it again there now?
It's only 2:10 p.m. on Friday, so I'm just chilling.
Oh,
It's
okay.
fine. Yeah.
I'm still in the past, so
Yeah.
uh,
The future is a little iffy over here, so
yeah. Um,
be
but
prepared.
we will talk
We'll
privately
talk. Yeah.
very soon.
Okay.
But thank you again for being my second guest on here,
Oh,
and
yeah. Thanks
yeah,
for having
maybe
me.
yeah maybe next Thursday we'll do something with just the audience and myself. Who knows? We'll see.
Play.
Um,
Have a play.
have a play. We'll play around. We'll play around with some ideas. All right. With that
Thanks,
being said,
everyone. Thanks for
thanks to
everyone for
everybody
being
for being
here.
part of it. And for people watching this on the replay, thank you for watching all the way through and stay tuned for the next time.
Bye.
Deuces.